this, or would y'all rather just?
It's helpful.
It is helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out on this Friday evening. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you are here to hang out and talk Black education, and I can speak on behalf of both of us in saying we appreciate that. We believe that everybody has a role in the advancement of our students, whether you are in an education, as an educator, a teacher in a building proper, or you're working in the adjacent spaces in the community. And so hopefully we're able to share some of that perspective. My name is Lauren Feaster. I'm a proud board member at HFCA, Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy. I've been on that board for a couple years now, maybe, but involved in the work much, much longer, and having had the privilege to work with and alongside and learn from our special guest tonight, Dr. Howard Fuller. And I'll let him say a few words too to get us started. We received a couple questions that you all wanted to address today. Even though there are very bright lights and a very expensive camera and a nice microphone, I want this to still be a casual space where we can feel comfortable asking questions, real questions, like we're over here. This is a space to really dig into what you want to explore around Black education. And then I also want to shout out, before I pass the mic over to Doc, all the folks that have been involved in the preparation and execution of tonight. If you could raise your hand. Thank you. Yes. Over there in the corner. And also want to appreciate our other board members that we have in the building. If you could raise your hand. There we go. Thank you. So you all might be subbing in and out and answering some questions as well. So this is your warning. And I'll pause there. And Doc, if you want to say hi and some general greetings.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say hello and thank everybody for coming out. I do a lot of these outside of Milwaukee. I very seldom do any of this in Milwaukee anymore. And so it's just, good to see you all out here. And my goal is to, I saw some of those questions. I think Danielle sent them out. I saw those questions. And I'm prepared to answer those questions or any other questions that you all have that you want to get into with me tonight. So that's it.
That's it. Awesome. So did everybody who's here see the questions ahead of time? Okay. I'm going to actually go through the questions just so that you all know where we're going, and then you'll know also if there's something else that's on your mind that you'll be able to let us know if we're going to cover it or if we need to cover it. What's up, Principal? Good to see you. All right, so the questions that we were going to address here, the first is about the achievement gap. Some folks refer to as the opportunity gap. I think it's a little bit of both, right? What's your take on that? The next was, what are some effective approaches to closing the achievement, access, opportunity gap? What are some effective strategies for fostering a sense of collective responsibility within the Black community? I feel like we could just talk about that question for a whole evening. Towards the education and empowerment of Black children. We printed some manifestos, right? So that was a project that we worked on, the Black Manifesto, and that would be something that you all should definitely take home and check out, because I think that answers some of these questions as well. The next was, how can Black educators and mentors serve as role models and sources of inspiration for Black youth, particularly in under-resourced schools and communities? And then what new is happening with the expansion of the mission at HFCA? Okay, so those are some of the questions we had. Is there any one of those that you all want to prioritize as we jump in? Or would you want to just start from the top? Y'all are educators, so we're not about to do this like, you know what I mean? Yeah, okay, start from the top. That's what you came for? Okay. All right. You like order? You look very linear. Okay, that's it. I like that. There's a space for that in the advancement of Black people. Order. So, Doc, let's jump in right there then. Let's talk about just the idea, the history of this achievement gap and your perspective and take on that.
Yeah, so I'm the one who don't like order. So
no struggle, no progress. Read that. It's Black History Month. Y'all can go ahead and take
Yeah, right. So I actually want to start. Okay, I want to start with that question about the under-resourced
Yeah.
community.
Sure.
And let me explain like why I want to start there. Because I think it's a bogus term. And what really is interesting to me is how hard we are with words when it comes to our music. Bitch that, MF this, blah, blah, blah. Ain't no such thing as, what do y'all call it, respectability language.
Politics,
And so we just, but then when it comes to laying out the realities of our oppression, we come up with words like under-resourced because it's a softer word as opposed to oppression. Because what we're experiencing is not being under-resourced. What we're experiencing is being a part of an oppressed community. And the reason why I want to start there is because if you're functioning at the level of we're under-resourced, then the answer to the first question would be, well, we just need more resources. And the problem with that is people don't care about our kids. See, we're starting with an assumption that the body politic, writ large in this country, cares about poor black children. And I'm saying they don't. And so as a result, when we start talking about, well, what is the strategy to deal with the achievement gap with the children from under-resourced communities, that's different than asking the question, how do we address the achievement gap for the children who come from the families of the disinherited? Which is what Howard Thurman said in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. So who are the disinherited? These are the people who get up every day with their backs up against the wall, trying to figure out how are we going to survive. And so the vast majority of children that we have in our school come from families who get up every day trying to figure out how are we going to survive. And that is not a question of being under-resourced. That's a question of being systematically and historically oppressed. So if you start with that assumption, which is what I do, then you begin to talk about what is this achievement gap? And the reason why you got to ask that is because we didn't have this achievement gap as long as I've been an adult. So at some point in time, you have to ask, how can this be? How is it, ask yourself this, how is it that on February 1st, 1960, 4 students from North Carolina A&T sit down at a lunch counter and demand to be served? And here we are in 2024, 4 students sit down at a lunch counter where they're welcome and can't read the menu. That's the question to ask. Because if you ask that question, then you know that the reason why there is, quote, an achievement gap, opportunity gap, whatever it is you want to call it, is because the children that we care about are not, they're not a priority in this country. Because if they were, we'd come up with the money, we'd come up with the plan, we'd come up with whatever it was that was needed in order to change that reality. So what that says to me is, whether you're going to call it achievement gap, opportunity gap, whatever it is, if that's going to change for the children that we care about, it's because we're going to change it.
Yeah.
There's not, you know, I was in this movie Waiting for Superman. There ain't no Superman that's going to come in to rescue us. No Superwoman, no super nobody that's going to come in to rescue us. So it's going to be up to us. But the last point I would make about that is I think we even got to redefine, whether you call it opportunity gap, achievement gap, whichever language you want to come up with, we've got to think more deeply about what is it that our children actually need? What is it that will define a high-performing school? What does it mean to say we're going to close the achievement gap within that context. Because when I see what's happening on a day-to-day basis in our school, and I'm sure it's true for Milwaukee Excellence and other schools around this city, this is about saving children's lives, literally. This is about trying to figure out how is it that we're going to help them survive a society that doesn't care about them. And yeah, it means that we got to do better on test scores and all of that, but that can't be the defining measure of the value that we're going to bring to our community. So let me stop with that. I don't know what you call it, but and then see if you all have questions that come off of that, or we can go back to the order of things and go to the next question.
I think you've stayed true to your, you stayed true to who you are and disrupting the order of things. But that was a lot. There were a couple things that I heard in that. One was around a very obvious concept, but like we can't change what we can't name and what we can't call, right? So I appreciate your push right there. I feel like that's something we can leave with immediately tonight. Like we should not be addressing, we should not be addressing these gaps or the way that we see ourselves in society with terms that are not true to what is actually the reality, which takes an acknowledgement of the history of what's happened to us. And we shouldn't be scared or shy, or we should at least question ourselves when we do find ourselves. Sometimes people say like BIPOC-ing things, right? Like saying BIPOC when you're supposed to be saying black. Like that's something that people do a lot, right? Like we're talking about black kids. Don't say BIPOC because we're talking about black kids, right? But I think you had an incredible point about being intentional about what we're solving for, because that's going to change the work that we put in. And then you also, we're talking about just generally as educators, but as a larger community, what is our contribution and how are we going to pour into ourselves and get ourselves out of this? Did you all have questions right away? Yep, go ahead, Q. Yep.
How would you define a highly performing black school system?
How would you define a highly performing black school system?
Yeah. So the way I look at this is when the kids come into our school, the first thing I want them to feel is that they're loved deeply, and that we care about their well-being. I mean, we sat in a classroom today, right, and saw 2 or 3 of our kids break down when the question was asked, what should we expect from your parents or something? And these kids literally broke down and started crying because what they were saying was, what happens when our parents are putting pressure on us or don't care about? I mean, you had to be there to sort of feel it, right? And the only way I know how you counter that type of raw feeling is you got to let them know, well, yeah, I hear you, but in this space right here, you're really going to be truly loved. You're really truly going to be cared for. But if I actually love you and I care for you, I'm also going to educate you. There's nothing worse than going to all of these happy-ass schools where can't nobody read. So that at a certain point in time, if I actually love you, then I'm going to ensure that you have the ability to read, write, think, analyze, and compute. But what I'm also going to do is make sure that when you come into this building where you are loved, that you're not going to be oppressed inside the building. Because what has happened over time with some of this ed reform stuff is that people couldn't develop relationships with our kids. So what they started doing was trying to control them. And see, I believe you can have both joy and discipline. Okay? I don't believe that those things are in contradiction with each other. But let me go back to your question, because answer what I wanted to answer. So, but let me explain again sort of how I saw the notion of a high-performing district, which is really what you asked, right? Okay, so when I was superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools, I decided that no matter what question people asked me, I was going to give my answer. And so my answer was this. When the young people from Milwaukee Public Schools graduate from MPS and they want to go to college, I want them to be able to go into the real college the first year and not have to spend 1 year or 2 years in remedial education. The second thing was for the young people who didn't want to go into college, but wanted to go directly into a job, I wanted them to be able to go into a job that would earn them a living wage. But I knew no matter which one of those pathways they were going to choose, they had to get the same rigorous education. Because a lot of times you hear people say, well, you know, all our kids don't go to college. Most of the people who say that shit went to college. That's how they get to come and tell our kids, you don't need to go to college. But what I was saying was, whether you want to go to college or go directly into a job, you got to have the same rigorous education. Because the days of, well, you can just get a trade, but you don't have to know math. You don't have to, those, if they ever existed, those days are gone, right? So whichever one of those two pathways the kids chose, I wanted them to have the same rigorous education. Because I also knew that many times young people graduate from high school and say, I don't want to go to college. But then 2 or 3 years later, they decide, hey, you know what? I want to go back to college. But you can't go back to college if you ain't never took no course while you were in high school that now allows you to make that decision. The third thing that I wanted was, I didn't want all of our kids coming out saying, I need somebody to give me a job. I wanted them to have an entrepreneurial spirit. This idea that I can go out and create a job, right? Because I believe that you can do well and do good. I mean, that's the idea, right? For all of our young people to be able to do well, but I don't want the kids from HFCA to think that the way I'm going to prove that I've really made it is to get the hell out of here and never come back. But I want them to say, I want to go out here, gain these skills, but then I want to come back and give back to this community, which leads to the fourth thing that I said. And that is, I wanted all of our kids to be prepared to engage in what Paulo Freire called the practice of freedoms.
Okay.
You know, the transformation of their world. So when you ask me what would a high-performing district or school for black children look like, it would look like that. it will prepare our young people for what I just said. But they would have that learning experience in an atmosphere that is surrounded by love, right? And I gave this speech in Philadelphia many years ago, right? And I said, oh, you know, we need to love our children. And this lady came up to me, she was all mad. You know, you mean I gotta love these kids like I do my husband? I was like, first of all, I don't know you and your husband. I don't know what y'all do. But I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about agape. I'm talking about unredeeming love, expecting nothing in return. Because there are days when we have to love our children, even though on those days they're not lovable. But hell, we ain't lovable every day either. So that's what I see. And if we do these things, they will do well on test scores.
Plain.
But I'm here to tell you, we've had students, and I know one in this room in particular, who I don't think you would say he was great on test scores, but now he got a master's degree because he had the stuff inside of him that we had to figure out how to reach. And it's not always going to show up on a test score. You feeling what I'm saying? And so we got to think more deeply about what it means to say, we're going to be high performing. Test scores have to be a part of that, but not the sole part of that. So that would be my response.
Yeah. Awesome, Doc. Other questions?
A comment more than a question.
Hold on, give her the mic. She got a comment here.
I'm not loud.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
As someone that was under Dr. Sutter's leadership before, when he said you have to love them, that was something that separated HFCA, MCA, CEO from other entities. Because if you don't love them, they won't learn. They won't learn from you. And loving them allowed us to get that information that was needed so that we can assist them with those things outside of school that was creating hurdles for them to show up at school. We had homelessness and things like that, but without that relationship, without loving on them, they didn't even feel open enough. There was some kids in there that were homeless and didn't tell anybody because they didn't feel that love. But once we tapped into that love part, they were able to give us that information so that we could assist them in clearing those hurdles. Parents, if we aren't loving on them, they're not going to be open and say, hey, I've never graduated 8th grade. So I can't help them with homework. I can't help, those type of, without that love, it's not there. And I think that's what separates an amazing school or a school of Black excellence from any other. They're just they're not a number. They're people. They have lifelong relationships. I'm still around alumni and kids that reach back out because they need assistance now, currently, and they're 24, 25 years old. So if it wasn't for that type of love or establishing that type of rapport with those families, it wouldn't be that type of thing. They wouldn't have an alumni day because people wouldn't continue to show back up. So yeah, I just want to say that's what makes it a school of excellence or a Black excellence school.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yep.
I actually have a question connected to this. I want to hear from you on, and that is the idea of love. And I think sometimes people think that love means a lack of discipline or lack of structure and order. So I would love to hear you talk about, when you talk about love, like how does that disconnect when you think about like the culture, the discipline, expectations, repercussions, all the things, right?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, let's acknowledge that one of the most difficult jobs in the world is teaching. Okay. I mean, we got a lot of people running around here pontificating who ain't never been in a building for more than 5 minutes. And so for people who are actually in there every single day, giving everything that they can to make a difference for these young people, that's a hard job. And some days it's almost like a brutal job in some ways. But there's no more noble job to have than to do that job. So what happens is our kids come into our buildings and they're bringing a lot with them when they walk through those doors. But so are a lot of teachers. But what occurs, and I'm going to try to really speak to this, Rashida, is what occurs is that on any given day, in every classroom somewhere in the United States, some kid goes off, or kids decide to fight, or all of these things. Because a lot of our kids come to school carrying a whole bunch of stuff, right, inside. And what she talked about was, and you know the one I'm gonna talk about. So I took this young lady to a restaurant, and it wasn't no big time restaurant. I think it was I don't know, cheesecake, it was something. But she had never been in one, okay? And so we sat down to order, and she was all embarrassed because she didn't know what to order, how to order, right? So I was like, babe, look, this ain't no big thing. Like, here's what this is, here's what this is, here's what, you know who I'm talking about. And here's what this is. So then we got comfortable, and I started saying, like, you know, I've been seeing you in school, and I can tell something's wrong, you know, something's not right. So she started explaining to me that her father, let me get this right, her mother left first to go live with her boyfriend.
Sorry.
Then the father left to go live with his girlfriend. She was staying in a one-bedroom apartment with 9 people. She slept on the floor in the bathroom.
Asking.
And the only thing she had for a pillow was her backpack. I'm sitting there, you know, trying to like take all this in. And I noticed that when she came to school in Milwaukee in the winter, all she had was a little flimsy jacket. Now, a lot of people would say that what she needed was counseling. No, what she needed was a coat. No, what she needed was a place to stay. You feeling me? She didn't need counseling. She needed a place to stay. She needed clothes. She needed somebody who cared about her in a way that made her feel human. So when we start talking about things like discipline, which you do have to talk about, the question is, how do you, quote, discipline someone who is going through stuff that some of y'all, you know, teachers, you gotta have grit. Some of these kids got more grit than you got in your whole body. They got it in their little finger, and you lecturing them about grit. So we have to figure out ways, because you gotta have order to have learning. You can't just people can't just do whatever they want to do. But the question is, how do we do that in a way that both respects their humanity, but yet keeps making demands on them, right? Because we can't, you know, like even today, we can't have our kids go out thinking that in the world you can just do what you just did there. You know why you can't do that? It's because we care about you in here, but out there, ain't nobody gonna care about you. I remember a little dude, he had special ed. And so he was always ready to fight. So one day he was walking past the classroom. I just happened to be standing there. And he said something to another dude who jumped up and started coming out of the classroom, right? So because I knew him, I said, hey man, the dudes come out of the classroom, take your ass back in the classroom, basically, is what I said, in a few more words. But everybody was clear what I was saying, right? Then I took this little dude and we walked around the building. And what I was saying to him, man, you know what? You either gonna get shot or somebody gonna shoot you. Because we in here talking about you got special ed, out on the street, and when you grab your shirt off like that, anybody ask you, do you have an IEP? You understand what I'm saying? And you know this stuff is bogus anyway, even though you got an IEP. You ain't no fool. You know what happens when you start taking off your shirt. So what I'm saying is that there is a way to have discipline. There is a way to have joy. There is a way to have order. But all of it begins with how we see these kids in the first place, right? And how they're going to be treated. And we're not going to always get it right, because sometimes we just ain't going to get it right. But if we start with respecting their humanity, if we start with what we want to do is keep you in school as opposed to throwing you out of school, if we start with, you can't be in the regular classroom right now because you're You just, for whatever reason, you're not ready to do that. Because if we don't do that, then the teachers feel they ain't got no support, right? If we just, you can do whatever you want, ain't nobody ever gonna do nothing, and you in there trying to teach 25, and you got somebody who's going off, there's gotta be a way to work with them, and they gotta have support. The teachers gotta have support. So what I'm trying to talk about, Rashida, is a way to have discipline that starts with how we feel about the kids in the first place. What kinds of things can we begin to do? So for example, every one of us know that every one of our buildings ought to have 2 or 3 people who don't do nothing but work with kids on their mental health needs. That's what we would have. If America cared about us, that's what we would have. We would have those kind of resources available.
Sugar dough.
But Rodney knew how I feel about this, so y'all can just disregard this. Plus, when we start building structures, we would start building structures, organizational structures, based on here's 25 kids in a classroom, here's a teacher. What do those 25 kids and that teacher need to be successful? And we would start putting those resources in place first before we get to all these people up at the top. Because what we do is we start at the top and drop them down on the school and on the kids. I'm saying we should start at the bottom and try to figure out on a day-to-day basis if we can provide the teacher with this, if we can provide this help, this support. This is going to give us the best chance ultimately to be successful. So that's a long answer, Rashida. We've talked about this a lot. I'm trying to figure out ways to keep kids in school. As to, you got brown shoes, go home. All of this stuff that we're doing, we got to step back for a minute, right? And think more deeply about how to support our children, but at the same time, letting them know that there's a certain way you got to function, right? You can't, we're not going to allow you to disrupt our classes, disrupt our building. We love you, but there's certain things we're not going to allow, period. Ain't no 15-year-old going to stand up in our school and call a teacher a bitch. There are schools, if that's what you got to do, you need to find a school where people are cool with you calling our teachers bitches. This ain't one of them. But I think you can be real with kids like that, right? Like, hey man, like if you want to stay here, you can't do this. You feeling me? We want you here, but there's a certain way that you're gonna have to perform. And I believe that if you are consistent,
Okay.
and it's done by people who they think care about them, you can make changes. But if they don't think you care about them, then they're not trying to hear whatever it is you got to say about anything. So
Doc, or any other thank you. Other questions? Yeah, okay.
How do you build that person who comes not from Milwaukee, not Chicago, not from Philadelphia, not from those types of places here?
right.
No place is similar to Milwaukee. But how do you build that or instill that in a teacher or an administrator that's coming into the city and has no idea that those things are also necessary?
I don't think that's city specific. I don't spend time all over this country. I spend a lot of time in New Orleans. Everybody say their city is different.
That's right.
And to a certain extent it is, but there are certain things that are the same, no matter what place you're in. And I think the principles that I'm talking about have nothing to do with what city you come from. It has to do with what is the mentality that you carry with you, into the work. So.
But I think the question kind of builds on, there's a theme here, well, a lot of things that you cover, but one of the questions that we talked about is around like organizing and activating community around the advancement of our students. Whether you are a teacher or you are supporting those teachers, you have a long background and success in just different types of organizing. How have you seen that lend itself to what you think we need to be doing right now with our folks around the advancement of our kids?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have a long history of success and failure. I mean, I done lost a whole lot more battles I feel that I've won. The thing for me is, are you willing to stay in the storm? Right, is the way that I would put it. So let me say it this way. So our approach, when I was superintendent, I didn't go into be a superintendent for a career. You know what I mean? I went in there trying to say, what can I do to change what I see happening? And because I didn't care, because I literally didn't care, I wasn't going to make decisions to protect my career. I didn't go in to be the superintendent to be the superintendent. I went in there to try to make a change. And since that's what I was doing, every day I tried to make decisions that I thought were in the best interests of the kids. And so what I'm saying, the first thing, and I'm not talking about a leadership role. So because I approach it as an organizer, I believe the first thing you always want to do is you want people to get to the point where they can lead themselves.
That's right.
So you want to constantly be trying to figure out, how do I give you more so that you feel that you can in fact lead yourself. And to a certain extent, that's ultimately what we're trying to do with our young people. But in a school structure, I believe that you have to have, I'm trying to remember, I think it was From Good to Great was the book. It talked about how you have to have tight something at the top, but then you have to have, it's like you have to have very clear expectations, but then people got to feel free to actually work every day to meet those expectations, right? Because ultimately, it ain't gonna work if you got people who don't feel that their views are respected. And I'll just say this, and I don't mean this because this is gonna be sort of generational, but you know, you millennials and Gen Zers, or whoever y'all are, y'all fragile, man. I mean, y'all get into your feelings, like, you know, quick. And so one of the things, and I'm trying to understand it because, you know what I'm saying? But we got to figure out ways where we can be real with each other without people getting hurt and stuff, because you're trying to like tell them the truth. You know, you're trying to like help them get better so that our kids can be better, right? So you got to have an organization, I believe, where you lay out very clearly, here's the expectations. We got to be willing to hold people accountable. And then there has to be consequences when it don't happen. Or else there's no reason to have these things that should be done if people know it ain't gonna matter whether they do it or not, because there's no accountability for anything. But at the same time, you don't want the place to be stifling. You know, you want people to feel a sense of freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility. So, that's all I said.
Yeah. Pausing for thoughts, questions, or reactions to what Doc is sharing. Anybody come with a intention? Y'all just drove in your car and just pulled up, like, I'm gonna go to Skybox, I'm gonna go downstairs, listen to what Doc gotta say. Nobody came with something they really wanted to cover or address?
I guess we could go back to those questions.
Yeah, we can, but go ahead.
All right, so we're thinking about the theme of tonight, Black Power and the vital role of education in our community.
Yep.
How do you push these aspects into the teachers so that they are like iterating with our students and really pushing for that type of success from, you know, the teacher, not just, the students.
So kind of like accountability as teachers. Is everybody here an educator? Raise your hand if you're an educator here right now. Okay. So we got a good group of educators, and to your point of just accountability, what does accountability look like?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think that's a very difficult question, actually. I mean, it sounds, I talked about it, but having real accountability is not the easiest thing in the world. Let's just say that, right? So one of the things that happened when I was superintendent was I visited all 156 buildings while I was superintendent. I went to every single school in the district. It took me 4 years to go to every school. And when I went into some schools, people used to pass me notes. Make sure you go to room 202. So you know how it is. You know how it is, you can go into a room and learning is taking place and you can almost like feel it, right? And for a lot of quote ghetto schools, particularly, white people or bougie Negroes, when they would go into a school and they walk into a classroom and it was quiet, there's, oh, that was really a great classroom. Well, many times that was a classroom where there was a truce. The kids and the teacher had a truce. The teacher ain't gonna do nothing, I ain't gonna do nothing, we both ain't gonna do nothing. That, just because the room's silent, that don't mean learning is taking place. You walk into a room that seems like it's chaos, but there's learning taking place. So you walk into these, I used to walk into these rooms where you could feel learning was taking place, and then I would walk right next door to death. And everybody in the building knew where the death rooms were. That's why they passed me those notes to make sure you go into room 202. Now, my view is, if we care about kids, we all should be holding each other responsible. It shouldn't just be up to the principal to do something about these death rooms. Those of us who are teaching ought to be talking to our colleagues about, hey, you know what? This that you're doing, this is not acceptable. Because I think ultimately for real accountability to work, it has to be collective. It can't just be sort of linear or vertical, top down. I think it's got to be horizontal. I think it's got to be, we all begin to know that we got to hold each other accountable.
Yes.
And I think when we develop that, we have a chance. You know what I mean? Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be successful, at least in my view. And so what I'm hoping is that, your generation and the people who are going to take the expanded HFCA to a whole different place in this city, that these are some ideas that you all are thinking about. Because I think we can, I know that we can be great. I really believe that. I believe that we have the possibility to build something here that has not been built before. We really do, right? But it's going to be on all of us, whether we're a board member or a teacher or the person who's in charge of making sure the building is clean and stuff is working, parent, students, that all of us together have an opportunity to do something great for our children. Just right behind here. And that other building that we're going to renovate. I just see that with the spirit that I've been seeing over the last, several weeks, and there's tension, but there's always going to be tension when you try to make change. We have the ability to really create something phenomenal for our children.
That's a good pivot, Doc. Talk about what we're building. What do we have the power and possibility to do if we act right?
Yeah. So okay. So HFCA and Milwaukee Excellence are coming together to create a new expanded HFCA. and it's going to be it's going to be a 6 through 12 school. The building that we are. Yeah, I did. I know. I heard you. So the building that we're currently in on 29th and Capitol, we now own. It used to be owned by Goodwill. Goodwill gifted the building to us. We're going to do 3 major things in that building. Number 1, we're going to tear down the fitness center and we're going to build a brand new gymnasium. We also are going to build a state-of-the-art music/production room. And the third thing we're going to do is change the HVAC system, which ain't as sexy as
All right, HVAC.
as the gym.
All right, HVAC.
And we may put a few more windows in there. And we're going to do something about probably the front.
Yeah.
So so that's going to be a beautiful thing. But right behind this, where we are right now, is the new HFCA high school being built from the ground up. This has never been done in the city of Milwaukee by an independent, unapologetically black-controlled institution that's not connected to a church or to some other institution. And I was in that building yesterday, and we're gonna have a gym, we're gonna have a fitness center, we're gonna have a world-class music/production studio. We're gonna have a maker space for robotics. We got a choir room. We got an art room. I mean, we got things that our kids, we're gonna have things there that our kids deserve, right? But a building is just a building. I've seen beautiful buildings before, and when you walked in there, it was jacked. It might as well have been a shack. So what we have is the opportunity to take these 2 beautiful buildings and do beautiful things for our children in those buildings. And I want that school to be, first of all, people talk about it as the kids say, it's my school, because my name is on it. But no, it's our school. Everybody who's going to be a part of this belongs to all of us. My name just happens to be on it, but it's going to be about all of us. And I'm crazy enough to believe that if all of us, like say we just going to do something for our kids that hasn't been done before. That's not to slight anybody, but that's just to say we're going to do something radically different. So one of the rules that I want to have, or we're going to have, because my name
it's not
is
your
on the
school, but
building.
your name on it.
It ain't my school.
But what we gonna have?
Yeah, but we got. So I don't know if y'all. There's a book that I used to teach, during Black History Month. I don't know, Amos, if y'all did, but the book is called Best of Intentions. And what it's about is a young man named Edmund Perry. This is a true story. He became a part of the Better Chance program. Back in the day, they used to have a program called ABC. And they used to go into poor communities, get bright young black people, and send them to some of the most exclusive private schools in the United States of America. Exeter is one of those schools. And so, this is a long story. Edmund went there. He graduated the summer, and he had got accepted in Stanford. The summer before he was supposed to go to Stanford, him and his older brother jumped an undercover cop, a white dude, and the dude killed him. This is the story. But at Exeter, they had a room in the senior building, I think it was, and it had this monstrous table with all the chairs around it. and every senior had to defend a project in that room. We're gonna have a room exactly like that. And so that every senior who graduates from HFCA is gonna have to go into that room and sit around that huge table and defend their project. You feeling me? I want our school to have something that don't nobody else have like that. So that students who graduate can come out and say, I defended my project in the seminar room. Okay. That's how I'm trying to think about what this is going to be like.
Yeah, I love that.
You know what I mean? I just, and then we're going to have a choir. I mean, I know Rodney was talking, and he talked about the Jubilee Singers. Like when FIST got started and they were about to go broke, what saved FIST was the Jubilee Singers, who went all around the world singing, representing FIST. We can't have a choir room and don't have no choir. You know what I mean? And a choir that begins to go at least all around this city, right? And the music production room, we were having a conversation with T-Pain. Man, T-Pain can sing, man. Without, I mean, have y'all heard him sing Tennessee Whiskey?
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm just saying. That's just an aside. But the idea that this room, it's going to be more than just the rappers, right? We want our kids to understand all the other jobs that are behind music production, right? And if you can think about, it's going to be a project-based way of approaching it. And so the result ultimately is going to be a CD or for the vinyl heads, a vinyl, right? I mean, can you just imagine what our kids are going to be able to produce in that room? So that's
just a little taste. Okay.
That's what I see.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. Any other questions that we got? Yeah. You got one more?
What would you say is the role of religion and spirituality in the Black education system?
Did you guys hear the question?
Yeah, the question was what I think the role of religion or spirituality is in Black education. I would say it this way: we have people who are spiritual, involved in religion. We got people who don't. So I approach it more from the standpoint of religion, because we're a traditional public school. We're a public school, not a traditional one. Unfortunately, religion won't be a part of what we do. But respect for our children who come into our building, who are religious, is important. Because I want all of our kids to be respected, no matter what they come in there with. No matter, because you all know that, we got young people who have totally different approaches to life, how they define themselves. I don't care how they define themselves. I don't care what religion they have. I don't care about none of that. If you come into our building, you are going to be respected and you are going to be loved. And anybody who can't love and respect you, they either going to have to change or they're going to have to go find another building. That's just the way I feel. Because every one of our children is precious, right? And so one of the things you always want to do, I think, is to give young people the mental capacity to pursue whatever their life objectives are, whether it's spiritual, non-spiritual. I want to develop your mind. So whatever it is you want to do, you're going to be able to do it at the highest level possible, because what we have helped you do is develop your brain power to pursue life as you define it.
Yeah.
That's right. Cool.
Any other questions?
Yeah? More song? No?
That's yours, last shot.
No,
Yep.
I think we
So, I think I heard you speak at I think it might be the African American Women's Center. It might be those. I think at least over a year ago. Maybe that was the same.
That was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little more than a year ago now.
Yeah,
it was,
right.
It was
Yeah,
actually
that was-
pre-COVID.
Oh.
Was
wow.
that pre-COVID?
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Oh, was it? Wow.
So this is like my second time, meeting you or hearing about you. I actually saw your face on it, and I saw the caption, but I'm not too familiar with yourself. So if you could, kind of tell us who Dr. Fuller is, could you
Yeah, so the quickest way for me to tell you is read my book. No,
Yeah.
or you can listen to it because So I wrote a book. It's called No Struggle, No Progress, and it is an
It's on one of those
autobiography.
flyers. Yeah.
And it is both written, and I also read it. So if you choose to listen to it, but just real quickly, like I was born in Louisiana. Came up here when I was 6 years old. So I lived first over on 11th Street between Reservoir and Vine, and then they built the Hillside Projects. So my mother and my stepfather, who I hated, always got to get that in. We moved over on the corner of 6th and Cherry. They tore our building down when they built the Boys and Girls Club. And after staying in Hillside, I had gone to St. Boniface. St. Boniface used to be where North Division is now. But anyway, so I went to St. Boniface through 7th grade. I got kicked out for behavior problems. And so then I went to Lincoln in the 8th grade because I lived in the projects. And when you lived in the projects, if you was black, you went to Lincoln. And it was Lincoln Junior and Senior High School. One of the people who went to school with me in the 8th grade was Al Jarreau. And in fact, when Al Jarreau died, he's a great jazz singer, right? I put on my Twitter post a picture of me and him in the quill because we were on the same page. So we moved out of projects, went back on 11th Street, in back of the house where I used to live. And because I lived on the west side of the 11th Street, I had to go to North Division, which was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. One of them. So when I went to North, North was like 75% white. By the time I graduated, it was 75% black. So I was in the changeover. So I played basketball. I played on the first team from the city of Milwaukee to ever go to the state tournament. North was the first team to ever get up that we lost. My junior year, we lost, and then we won the consolation championship. My senior year, we lost 62-59. Not that I remember.
What happened? Who did it?
No, we got cheated.
Okay.
we did get cheated.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We got cheated. And then I got a basketball scholarship to go to Carroll. It was then Carroll College. It's now Carroll University. I was the first black person, the first black male to graduate from Carroll. I then went and got my master's degree. I went down to North Carolina, and I was a community organizer. I don't know if you all ever have a book called Best of Enemies, and there's a movie called Best of Enemies, where the woman from Empire, Taj, yeah, she plays a woman named Ann Atwater. And the whole thing is about Ann developing a relationship with the head of the Klan in Durham. I'm the one who trained Ann Atwater as an organizer. And so I came back to Milwaukee. I got into a lot of issues down in North Carolina. I came back to Milwaukee in '76. The first thing I got involved in was the coalition to save North Division. And then in July of 1981, Ernest Lacy was killed in the same way that George Floyd was 40 years later. And so me and Michael McGee Sr. led an organization called Coalition for Justice for Ernest Lacy. And we were the first ones that ever got anything done to any cop that ever killed a black person in the city of Milwaukee. And there's a long list before Ernest Lacy. And then, I just did a lot of stuff. I mean, I worked for Governor Earl as the Secretary of Employment Relations. I was the Dean of General Education at MATC. I was the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services for Milwaukee County, and I was the Superintendent.
Marquette.
Yeah, and then I created my own institute at Marquette.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've done
Done a
stuff.
little Africa, Mozambique. You gotta read. He gave you a snippet. That was.
But like I
yeah.
told the kids today, like one of the things that I feel most grateful for is that I've been all over the world.
Yeah.
Right. I've been to Tanzania, Nigeria, Zambia, Senegal. I've been to Grenada, Jamaica, Trinidad, Antigua. I've been to Canada. I've been to New Zealand, London, France, Sweden, Denmark, and I've spoken all over the world. And getting an education is the thing that opened up all of those doors. That's why I feel so deeply about the importance of our kids getting an education.
Same.
Well, another round of
That's a
applause for
brief.
Dr. Fuller.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Madam Leader for being
sitting here,
with me. Yeah,
for sitting here and passing you the microphone.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't know what's next. If you all have any directions for folks, Danielle or Aaron.
Where is he? Starting to go.
Sure. So,
Okay.
hi everybody. I'm Lindy. I work at Milwaukee Excellence, and I'm also very grateful